Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's Andrea Bailey Brown here, and welcome to this episode of the Franchise Millionaire Show. And I'm excited for today's episode because it is a personal one. I am going to be sharing with you my path from teacher to multi-unit, multi-million dollar franchise owner, and also key turning points, key decision making points, and also lessons that I've learned along the way. And my wish is that you can use my story to inspire yourself and to find ways in which you too can make that transition. Whether you're looking at transitioning from being a nurse into owning your own business, maybe being an accountant, also being a mechanic, being a stay at home mom, whatever that is for you, I just want to share with you my story, my origin story, where it all started, what led me to this side of things. And I was where maybe you're listening today, you're thinking about making this jump, but there's so much to it. And for a lot of people, it includes a lot of fear, a lack of knowledge. And I'm just going to share my story. And then you can see how it became possible for me. So at first, I'm going to start off with a bit about my background. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and decided to move to Canada. Well, my mom made the decision, and as a child, you just follow along with the decision. You don't necessarily make the call yourself. But I moved to Canada as a teenager and went right into high school. And so that was just the starter story for me. So it did not come from a lot of money or anything like that. Basically, an immigrant that just went to Canada and went to school. And in high school, I realized that I was a bit further ahead because of the education system in Jamaica, that I could actually move up in some of my subjects. And one of the couple subjects that I was taking in Jamaica that I continued on when I got to Canada was French and German. So I started learning second languages in the island in the Caribbean. I'm not sure if many people are aware of that. And it so happened when I got to Canada, realized that French was one of the main languages. So Canada has two main languages, English and French. A little bit of history here, but that's basically where my love of languages started, was in the islands. And I came to Canada and thought, wow, I'm already studying it. Why not just continue on while I'm in school here as well? So once I finished high school at a very young age, and then decided to go straight into university. Didn't take a break, didn't travel to Europe like many people did. Was not even a thought. Who is going to pay for this, right? And when you're from the Caribbean with Caribbean parent, you're not thinking about Europe. You're just thinking about getting out, going to school, getting a job. So went to the University of Alberta, and I started off by going actually into the French section of the university. So born in Jamaica, speaking only English, learned a little bit of French, and had the audacity to go into the Faculté Saint Jean, which is the French part of the university, and all my subjects were in French. So you're studying sociology, psychology, some English classes, all your programs were in French. And I was not a natural French speaker, but I worked really, really hard in order to get through. And that hard work just carried through most of my life. Not afraid of a challenge. And that was a mega challenge for me. But I had to tough it out. I had to figure out to put the work in to get through. So I spent a year in the French part of the university. And then I smartened up. I realized, wow, I'm working twice as hard as the people who are natural French speakers. And so I transferred out into the regular part, English part of the university, and carried on from there. So once I graduated, I went into education because my plan was to become a teacher. So I graduated with a French major and a German minor. So I have a love of language. Originally, I thought thought I was going to be a linguist. I was going to work for the UN. I had just great big dreams of like being in New York. And that was where, because where else were you going to be a linguist? I don't know. So that was my kind of vision. There's also, I could be a teacher and teach other people to speak the second language. So that was part of my journey. I got hired with the public school board and was hired as a French teacher teaching junior high students, grades 7 to 9. And I was enjoying that as well. But something else happened along the way to there's a show called Something Happened Along the Way. I don't know, to the circus or along the way to someplace, but along the way, as I was in my third year of university, something happened. A tiny thing called entrepreneurship happened. And how did it happen? I was basically working at a chocolate store. That's where part-time job while you're going to school. And while I was there, I started to realize there were little things that the owners could have been doing, but they weren't doing. And I started making cards to collect people's email. I was paying attention to the business. And a big aha moment that I had was during Valentine's. This was a chocolate shop, right? They got orders from like the royal family. So this is pretty big deal in a small town that no one may have heard of. But I noticed something significant. And what was happening was during their busiest season, they did not have enough product. They were running out of chocolates for customers. And I know you may have to be clutching your pearls if you're an entrepreneur listening to this, but they were actually limiting how much chocolates people could buy during their busy season. Can you imagine that? Like you're telling your customers who wants a dozen of the product or 2 dozen, so sorry, you can only have six, you can only have five. Like it made no sense. And that's when I learned what is now probably people call, in terms of supply chain management. These are fancy words, but I was learning about supply chain management in my third year of university because they weren't handling their supplies really well. Another thing is they only had one person producing the product, and when you only have a single product line, it can become problematic, right? So that's where it all started for me. And the owner came in and I had made these cards to collect people's information. This is pre-email and all the internet fancy stuff. And she asked me, "Oh, what is this?" I said, "Oh, I'm collecting people's names and so we can, mail them things." And she's like, "Oh, okay." So she was paying attention to what I was doing. Now she was looking at selling that location. And I remember just saying, "Hey, I'd like to buy this store." And she said, "Oh, okay." And we worked out a plan as to what I would pay for products, the plan for the business overall. And that is basically how I owned my first business and where the entrepreneurship bug really came in and started. Of course, I was in my third year university. My mom, because I was raised by a single mom, basically said to me, "You need to finish your education. Once you have it, it cannot be taken away." And so I really followed along that line and was doing both. So when I got hired as a teacher and was in my school, I was running a business, a small business, yes, but I was learning how to run and operate a company. And then I went on to open a second company it was in the mall downtown. And it was all really great. While I was there running the chocolate business, I had some real influential entrepreneurs that would come in and would talk and they would say, "Hey, you need to move your business over to this bigger mall." And I was getting tips and tricks along the way. But once I went in to teach full time, it got so consuming. Brand new teacher and all the things that you have to do with lesson planning, learning the system, marking papers, running a store at such a young age and doing both was really, really difficult. And what I ended up doing was ended up closing the chocolate business and the other business I had. So a light bulb moment there. I just thought if you have a business, you can just sell the business and realize that not all businesses can be sold. And the stat shows that many businesses, only a small percent of businesses actually end up being for sale or people have built something that someone will ultimately want to buy. So those are some of the things that I realized in terms of selling a business. So that was lesson number one. So close the business and focused on teaching full time. Now, another thing is being a business owner and full-time job, it's not easy to do, but I figured it out. So while I was teaching, I thought, this is it, I'm going to focus on this. But guess what? Being an entrepreneur never left me. I basically still wanted to be in that world. And that's where all these next lessons are going to come into play. When I was teaching, I realized the energy was also a little bit different in the teaching world versus the entrepreneurship world. And that's why you have to make sure you are in a good ecosystem and that you find yourself in places where you can actually be having the conversations that you want to have. When I was around entrepreneurs and business owners and I was going to conferences, the energy was optimistic. It was about big goals. It was you're empowered, motivated, planning your next year. And so I could sense the difference. So those were some of the key turning points for me. So I would say to you, listen to your energy. What are you feeling when you're in certain spaces versus when you're in other spaces? And around entrepreneurs, I felt like I was reading great books. I was inspired and I was always a lot more motivated, I would have to say. And because my store had been closed, did not sell, it made no money from that. I really started thinking about what if I could get into something where I had like a business that I could sell, right? But I got into direct sales. So that's another part of my journey. In direct sales, I really started by selling clothing product, and that was with weekender ladies wear. The fashion, I would say, wasn't all my style and everything, but nonetheless, I would have to say that I had to learn to make it my own. But what I loved about it was I could make money work doing one show a week or so, maybe one to two. And I loved that about it. I loved that through direct sales, I actually learned how to talk to people. I learned how to sell. I learned how to pick up the phone and ask for a sale, invite people to a show. I learned how to say, hey, I started this business. Can you help me? So that was one of the things that I really liked about being in direct sales. So I started in direct sales while I was teaching and then went on to another company as well. And that's what I did to quell the entrepreneurship side of things that I really wanted to do. So something for you to think about. I often say to people, don't curse your 9 to 5. What are you doing with your 5 to 12? That is the key thing, people. Figure out how you can use the extra time that you have. So that's what I did. I got into direct sales so that I could get out in the evenings. I could set my own hours. It's up to me to decide how many shows I wanted to do. So there's so many parts that this field really taught me. Another thing that I realized that I love the world of direct sales because I would go to the conferences and they would bring in major speakers so we could learn from them. For example, if you've ever read any of the Chicken Soup for the Soul, Mark Victor Hansen and those guys they're always very, really influential speakers and we could learn from them. I love the energy and the high that I got around being with entrepreneurs. And then I would come back to school and I went from like a 12 or 100 down to like, turn down the lights like you're dimming. And I just had a feeling like when that song, Turn Down for What? Like, why am I turning myself down? I want to stay in that energy. And I knew I had to create a path, an exit ramp for myself. And so that is, again, as I say, listen to your energy. Where are you turned up and where are you like feeling flat? And my energy and listening to that, my intuition has always been really strong and has led me to where I am today. And then someone recommended a book to me and it was called You Can't Send a Duck to Eagle School. And I realized I was an eagle, but I was in duck school. I was in like around the chickens. And so I really now had to figure out, how do I become the eagle that I was born to be? And so what I would say to you is that you have to listen to the calling, because your calling is not somebody else's calling. And I'm going to repeat that. Your calling is not somebody else's calling. And in the teaching world, I knew a lot of teachers, they were great teachers there. They were meant to be there for the lifetime of teaching. They were meant to be there for 25, 30 years, because they were always talking about pension. They were, they would show up early before school even started. Like when we're coming back from summer break, some people are showing up in July. I was that person. I was like, I need an extension on this summer break, even though I had 2 months. So those were some of the things when I knew it was just time for me to start looking at something else. There's some of the teachers there, they were interested in becoming a principal and moving up. None of that language enticed me. I kept like, why? Like I couldn't get it, but I understand it now, that there's some people that were meant for that world, and I wasn't that some people, right? However, once I became an entrepreneur, went into my business more full time, well, guess what I did? I went back, went to business school, got my MBA, right? A master's in business administration. Earlier this year, went to Harvard for a program called Leading Business and Personal Transition. Like, go figure, because I'm actually in a place where where I was meant to be. My whole Harvard experience, that will be another episode, because that deserves an episode on its own. So we will definitely talk about my takeaways, my learnings, and how I'm implementing them now in my business. So, definitely, I would say you must listen to your calling, listen to where you're energized, listen to the people around you, how they speak, what they're talking about, and does that resonate with you? Is that you? Maybe it started out in the beginning, it was a good place for you to be in your life, but as you are evolving, as you are growing, you're realizing that this is no longer the place for you. And that is how you transition from wherever you're at now to the next place that you actually want to be. So sometimes as well, the next thing is, I would say you have to turn down the noise. In order for me to move from teaching to franchise ownership to direct sales, anything like that, you must learn how to turn down the noise, and turning down the noise from the negative news that you listen to, from family and friends that may be afraid for you, because they cannot see the vision. They did not get the download that you got. They weren't supposed to complete the same journey, the same story, the same mission. Everyone got a different assignment, and you're confusing other people's assignment with your assignment. No confusion here, people. Just keep it straight. I know, even for myself, my dear mom, that I love her so much, and she very, very close. I respect her, very smart woman. She was also a little afraid for me, because she was saying, you're going to give up that great teaching job. It's hard to get on with the school board. You're going to give up the pension and all of that. And she was right. I had to ask myself those hard questions. Am I going to give up those things? What if this doesn't work? Am I going to get back with the school board? But I still had to bet on myself, because I knew the calling was really so strong. So you have to turn down the noise from family and friends that may be afraid for you, for the people who are always thinking doom and gloom. And you also have to turn down the negative noises and the negative things that you say to yourself as well. It's not just the outside people. That's easy, because we can blame them, and we can say, oh my gosh, this one person said they didn't think I was going to make it. Or it's easy for us to say, my husband wasn't cheering me on, my ex-husband, my sister, my friend. I know that we all want it to be on the outside. Like, that's the easy part, when it's those people, the other people, right? But when it's we are the people, then it's like, holy, when you are your worst enemy, when you go to sleep and the voices start to talk to you, and it's like, can you really do this? What are you doing? What the heck? What if this doesn't work? That is now the real voice, right? Because it's easy to blame the others, the boyfriend, the ex-husband, the friend, the but. So listen to that. Are you your own people that's you're afraid of? So I would also say one of the things that I was able to transition from teaching into being a franchise owner, a multi-unit franchise owner, was that I would say you have to get yourself into an entrepreneurial ecosystem while you're at your 9 to 5. Because the conversations that people were having when I went into the staff room as a teacher, it's just going to be different than when you're with the entrepreneurs. So, with my direct sales company, they had regular meetings that we had locally, conferences. Sometimes we had regional conferences and meetings. And even though I was teaching, I would always find myself there. And you know what? I was investing and betting on myself early on before I was even a franchise owner. And what did that look like? Well, for example, when they had a conference and it's like a 2 day conference or so, and I needed an extra day, I would actually take the day off. I would lose pay for that day and I would have to pay for the sub and all of that. I still did it. I was willing to bet on myself from an earlier time. I didn't wait. So, what people think is when I make money, when I'm a big entrepreneur, then I'll invest in myself. You have to start practicing now. So, make sure that you are part of different business groups and different ecosystem. That's why I'm really excited that we have the Franchise Millionaire show, but we have the Franchise Millionaires Club, and that's where we gather with people who are like-minded and who want to actually talk about what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And you get into those ecosystem because you have to look for them, you have to search it out. And like I said, the conversations that are happening in a staff room, in the staff room, the conversations are about students, which students aren't behaving, which parents are doing certain things, what are we going to do with certain clubs, who's going to bring the sandwich. And I mean, it's just the work, it's the conversation. It's not talking about world domination. They're not talking about how to build a 6-figure business, how to build $1 million company. We're not talking about hiring and teams and that. You're not going to find it in your regular 9 to 5 job. Don't get upset at the people. Don't get mad at them because your colleagues, your team members are talking about certain topics that relates to the job. That's what they should be doing. So you now have to figure out how to invest in yourself, to find yourself in spaces where the conversations can be at a different level and at a higher level. So like I said before, don't curse your 9 to 5. It's what you're doing with your 5 to 12. You have time to show up once a month, maybe to a business meeting, a conference is in your town, and you're interested in something like that. Show up, start learning as you are doing both. So I've always been, while I was teaching, I was doing my direct sales business, my chocolate business, my franchise business. Like, hey, I realized I had enough time, and that's another thing. I started to do sort of a time check. And if I can basically be watching TV, and some people can sit and watch the hockey games, they watch the football games, reality TV. I'm not mad because I watch those too. But then you can't complain, well, I have no time, too busy from work. You have to make it a priority if you want to. So that's basically what I did. So in direct sales, I learned something that helped me to become a franchise owner and got me onto the next part of my journey. So as I mentioned, I learned to sell. So when I left the first company, the clothing company that I was with, I exited that company because I realized there was something that I had. The word people used to call me that I'm a visionary, but I realized something is up with this company. I don't think the company is going to make it and is going to last. So I started to look for an exit plan. And that is something that's very, very important, right? Knowing when to exit before it's time. Sometimes you may have to sell your company when you do those things. So while I was actually in that first direct sales company, I'm like, something is off. The numbers were off. The people. I started to ask hard questions, and the powers that be was like, oh, why are you asking those questions? Because I started to realize I knew something, and I'm not the person that drinks the Kool-Aid just because everybody else is. Never been and never will be. So I'm always looking for what is working and what is not. And so I started to see the changes. So in my first company at Weekenders Ladies Wear, I basically became a manager. And it's very hard to work your way up to becoming a manager, but finally got there, had a team, and it was great. But I had to exit when I noticed the company wasn't where I thought it should be. The next thing was then I went on to another direct sales company, Solpada Designs Jewelry. They Sterling Silver Jewelry, a great company. Loved the product. The product was very strong. People also loved it, and became one of a director, one of only four in all of Canada, and only one in Western Canada to make it to a sales a director of. I have to remember the terminology. It feels like it's all missing me, but it's also became one of the bigger directors with a team of about 500 people. And I mean, I was getting paid really well. Our teams were doing well. Commissions, 15,000. Like it was also good. But again, I pay attention to the market. I pay attention to the trends and what is happening. And then I started to ask myself questions like, is this what I always want to do? Do I always want to have to be booking people, going to do shows? Because there are certain stipulations in there that even though my team was having we had months over 100,000 plus, like you weren't going to be given that commission unless you personally produced a certain amount, right? So again, even if your team was producing, which or my team was, for me to access and be paid out that 10,000 for the month, 15,000, whatever it was, I also had certain sales requirement that I had to complete. And it was good in the beginning, but then I was like, do I always want to be in the hunting side and looking for sales and looking for people just to be paid out? And I really didn't necessarily want that. But then I saw changes again coming in the industry. Yeah, again, pay attention. We're talking about a company that blew up, did excellent, and was even acquired by, say, Avon wanted to buy them out. So I saw all of that, and then the changes happened, but I pay attention. So while everyone was, like Drake would say, I'm not about the rah rah. Everybody's rah rahing and getting excited at a conference and the new products. I was paying attention to the numbers and what was happening. Was the sales up? Was the sales declining? I was also paying attention to some of the key people in the business that were exiting. So I look at everything. I'm not just about the Kool-Aid people. This is a business. No matter what company you get into or what you're in, you are in a business, and pay attention to those numbers. So I definitely did that, paid attention. And then once I saw the signs and my team was that big, I also realized something really became clear to me, that as big a business as I've built, I was not going to be able to sell it or pass it on to my children or anything like that. And that was a light bulb moment for me. So I really wanted something that I could sell, that could make great money, but I could sell, and that's where franchising really also came in. Even though, so I started to think about that in advance, right? And I bought owned my franchise. People may not know this. I owned my franchise also while I was building my direct sales company, because I just believe in multiple businesses at different times. And, so we can also talk more about that as well. So when it basically came to, my story in terms of my business, they're very stacked, right? So I'm teaching while I have my chocolate business, while I'm in direct sales, sold one by my franchise. So, because I don't think our journey is just linear and very long. We can be doing multiple things at the same time. So that was what was happening in my part of the journey. And so having a business to sell is where I would say franchising, came to be for me. And I love the fact that with the franchise, you can own it, run it. And so I've bought franchises. I have built them and I've built businesses. I've sold some of my franchise locations. I've bought resale. I've bought business that was built from ground up with zero sales, and I had to figure out how to grow it. It's just a whole different way of running a business. So my journey now in terms of how we got into franchising and how we specifically got into this franchise, Jiffy Lube franchise, is a story on its own. And why did we choose Jiffy Lube? How did it all come about? And the first part of the story has been a little bit about my personal journey. And this next part is where I would say my current husband entered the chat, and how we built this company and why we chose to be, Jiffy Lube franchise owners. How does that happen? Where do you find the funding? Again, none of us came from a lot of money where all of that was handed down to us, but it's all about a determination, a vision for yourself, a vision for what you actually want to do with your life. It's all of that that brings you to where you're at. Nothing is going to necessarily be just handed to you. You have to have an idea, you have to have a goal. And I often say to people, everything that you see and you're surrounded all started off with an idea. This, laptop that I'm recording this on was someone's idea. The table that I'm sitting, that my laptop is sitting on, the chair that I'm in right now, the lights, everything around you started off as an idea. So to become a multi-unit franchise owner, and build and having million in dollars of sales, it has to start somewhere, and it has to start with you and that vision. And that is where in episode part 2 of this story, I'm going to dedicate part 2 purely to the franchising section and Jiffy Lube and how that happens and how do you become a multi-unit franchise owner. So I have so much to share with you, and thank you for being here and helping me sort of have a recap of this story. Sometimes when you have lived your story, you don't realize all the different parts of it, the twists and turns, the decisions that you've made, and pivotal decisions that lead you to where you're at. And so I'm grateful for this. I thank you. I want you to make sure that you are subscribing, you're leaving us a review. That's how we're going to grow this, and that you can share this with your friends and your family. And if this resonates with you, please reach out to us and join us as well, as we are going to be hosting our Franchise Millionaire Planning Retreat in December, on December 7th. And this is where we're going to show you how to make your big visions come to life and how to have that plan for the next step of your journey. And I cannot wait to see you again soon and hear from you as well.